let's talk about the dress form first. I've gone through and marked the waistline and the neck. And when I marked the waistline, I tried to be really careful about making it level all the way across. First, when you're looking for the waistline, you want it to be the narrowest point on the body, so you would look for a plane change. If each of my hands represented a plane where it changes direction and they both meet is where the waist is going to be. Across the front on this particular form, there's kind of a flatness, so I can take it to these two plane changes that are obvious and then let it be level as it comes around to the center front. A couple of other plane changes that are going to make a difference. If you're looking at the side view, you have this area that's carved out underneath that for our basic slope or draping we're going to ignore. I'll probably mark it so I can use that information later. But we're just going to bridge from the narrowest point to the widest point for now. And then often you'll see a piece of tape put across there so that that plane change is just straight across between the two. I'm going to bridge using fabric rather than putting tape on. Then as you look at the form, you're also going to see where I put little corners. This is where you need to have a right angle where this line meets that line. So when you're making a pattern, you have several curved lines joined by straight lines. So every other line is going to be curved and every other line is going to be straight. So here we have a curve joining with a right angle with a straight line joining with a right angle. It'll be down here, but it's easier to see there, with a curve that goes around another right angle into a straight line. So I'm not going to mark this whole line when I make my pattern. I'm going to mark the beginning and the end, and I've made sure that I make this edge halfway between the two so that the bottom of my armpit distinguishes where my side seam goes. I can't really move that either direction, which means that depending on where your armpit is and you extend a line straight down, sometimes the back of the body is going to be bigger and sometimes the front is going to be bigger. So the armpit is right where you get a right angle at the bottom of the circle. Then since this is my front edge right here where I've got a plane change happening, and the same back here, halfway between the two happens to be the bottom of that curve, so it's a right angle. Then at the top, right here, this usually is not a right angle, but the total of this angle and this angle will add up to 180. This one is often a right angle, but sometimes it's like this one in that the total of this angle and that one add up to 180 as well. It depends on the shape of the person or form that you're draping. Okay, so I could start with the front or the back bodice. I think I'll start with the back this time. I have carefully marked them so that I know where the green lines are. I took the time to make sure that went right on a thread. You can pull a thread if you'd prefer, but I'm going to raise this up and line this straight line up with my center back. And I'm putting the pin in diagonally so that when I pull on the fabric it doesn't slide. It's going to stay anchored where it belongs. Then I'm feeling for where my center back is, and I'm making sure that that line ends up on it, and I'm putting the pin in so that when I tug on it, it doesn't pull away from where it belongs. I've also made a little note on it which dress form I'm draping. This happens to be number 13 of the half scale ones. And across the widest part of the back right here, if you feel your back and where your shoulder is, the top of your shoulder blade is here and the bottom of your shoulder blade is represented by those two lines. So I'm kind of going between the two and smoothing them around and kind of making it flat right there. And I'm going to put in a preliminary pin, and then this is kind of adjustable. I could move this out and maybe completely, almost completely get rid of the dart right there, but that would mean that I'd be putting a little bit into the armhole, and I don't want that. So I'm going to push that back down, and I find that that's something we end up truing after the pattern is made, when we're combining it with the front. I think I got a flat pin. Okay. So I'm smoothing that down, and I can put a pin right here. And that may become a dart, but before I do that, I'm going to start with the top up here, and I need to find the shape of the neckline. And I have to cut this before I can find the shape. So I need to stand where you can see that. So I'm going to start, sorry, that probably just got louder. I'm going to start by cutting straight down, and I'm going to stop when I get to that line. And then as I do that, I'm going to push this over, and it starts to wrinkle right there. So I'm going to cut about 1/4 of an inch away at the bottom. And you see how that's smoothing out? Then when it continues to wrinkle, I need to put in another clip. So usually I'll put my scissors at the bottom of the neckline and roll the fabric into the scissors. That way, if I'm working on a real person or even the dress form, I'm less likely to cut them or cut their hair. And I'm aiming in like wagon wheel spokes. I'm not cutting parallel lines. So I've just determined the shape of that back neck and the shoulder seam. So I'm going to stand it back up for a minute. And I'll go ahead and put pins in place. Now I've got this little thing happening here that needs to be a dart. I can't bring it down. I could put a dart there, but you don't very often see one. So I've got that smooth. I'm going to let this go for a minute, leaving this one. And I'm smoothing that out right there. And I'm just going to anchor it for a minute. And while that's anchored, I'm finding a dart width right there. So my dart's going to end here, or maybe even a little bit past that. And I want it to be as small as possible. So I've got a little bit of ease happening down here, but I think that is going to be a good dart size right there. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a couple more pins. Alright, so if I clip this going around, I'll find out better whether I've got it in the right place. And I don't want to clip past those lines that I put on her. I'm going to leave enough space there for seam allowance. So I'm not getting right up to the edge of the line. And it looks to me like that was a pretty good spot. So I'll come around and tilt it where you can see it a little bit better. So it's smooth up here, smooth around the front. I've got a little bit of a bump there, but I think that's just the way I've got the pin in. And then this is hanging smoothly now that it's been clipped. So we'll go back to working on the side. When I get through with that, I'm going to find where I can feel that line, and I'll draw a straight line from that point to the other end of the straight line. That's right here. And if I end up moving a little bit slower than you want to hear, you can always speed me up. I find when I go back and listen to things, I usually want to speed it up. Okay, so this area, you can get rid of a lot of that dart if you've got a separate bodice and a separate skirt. And this dart comes into the side seam or comes back into the dart, and it really depends on what you're going to do with it. I'm going to eventually make a princess line pattern where my bodice dart and my skirt darts are lined up with each other. So I'm going to smooth that out and have as little as possible right there. But that's not always the best answer. It depends on what you're going to do with the pattern. That's just my opinion though. Okay, so I'm trimming up to the bottom of that line, and I want to fold the center of this dart as close to on the grain as possible. And then I'm going to put a little pin right there. So that's not a very big dart. If for some reason I needed it to be bigger though, I could draw a line in from about here and swing in more. Okay, so the width of my dart is, use a different pencil. I can see the other side of the fold and the inside of the fold. This area out here is the middle of the dart. So what I really want to mark is under here. And then my narrowest point I'm marking. And I'm double checking because I can't really feel where that line is, but I can see it. So here we go. So that's my corner, and I put that in to anchor it going the opposite direction. And do you see how this is creating a disturbance? If I just release that pin and put it back, even though it's almost in identically the same spot, the pin was making it difficult for me. Okay, so I'm getting rid of a little bit more fabric so I can see. I'm marking the top of this line. And then after I get it on paper, I'll connect those two. And I'm feeling for my plane change, so I'm just tipping it over. And I'm feeling for that corner right there. Double checking that. So when I end up with this transition from this line to this one needs to be a right angle, and so does that one. This one is usually a right angle, and so is this one. Okay, so bottom of my armhole. And the choice for the shape of this curve right here, it kind of changes a little bit from one person to another. But what you're looking for is a line that blends smoothly between this corner and this angle right here. So I could bring that in a little tighter, and then when I try it on with a sleeve, I might adjust that a little bit. But it's kind of your first best guess. And then I'm going to draw a straight line from here to here. And of course, my ruler is in a special place. I have a lot of special places. So I'm using a straight edge. And I'm going to draw a straight line right there. And I'm also going to draw a straight line here. Kind of need 3 hands for that. I don't usually do this in this position. Okay, so this dart right here is not centered. It's where I was able to fold it out. So I know I'm going to be moving this dart from this position right here, and I'm marking the fold and where it comes to. But eventually I'm going to find the center and move the dart to the center. But I'll wait till I get to the paper to do that. So right now I'm going to switch directions for this so that it stays together. And I'm going to trim off a little bit of the fabric so that I've got about a seam allowance width there. It's a little more than that. I'm not going to take this off of the dress form until I've draped the front, and by doing that it's going to make it easier for me to put the front with the back and make them join perfectly. So there is my basic back sloper. And if I cut this off, any wrinkles I have here will go away too. The other thing that I'm looking at right here, this dart is kind of centered, the top of it between here and here. I want this one to kind of be centered there too. And that should happen when that moves. I'm looking for 2 darts that are aiming at each other so that they'll make a nice princess line when the time comes. They'll also hang nicer when they're sewn.